Today is January 29th, 2026. The world feels smaller than ever. We have maps for every corner of the globe. Satellites watch us from above. You'd think there are no more mysteries left, but some places remain wild. They are deep, dark, and hold secrets. The vast forests of Oregon are one such place. Imagine towering pines that block out the sun. The ground is a thick carpet of needles, silencing your every step. It's a place where history and legend intertwine. People have lived here for thousands of years, and their stories speak of things that walk in the shadows, things the modern world has forgotten. It's here, in this isolated and imposing landscape, that our story begins. This wasn't an expedition for a lost city or a hidden treasure. It was a training mission. A group of the most elite soldiers in the U.S. military was sent into these mountains. U.S. Army Rangers and Marine Force Recon. These are men trained to operate in the most hostile environments on Earth. Their mission was to test their skills in navigation, survival, and teamwork. They were dropped deep into the Cascade Range, far from any town or road. The objective was simple: move through the dense terrain, establish a series of observation posts, and get to an extraction point. It was a test of endurance and discipline, a challenge they had faced countless times before. The air in these mountains has a weight to it. It's cold, crisp, and carries the scent of pine and damp earth. As the helicopters faded into the distance, a profound silence fell over the team. This was true isolation. For these soldiers, it was just another day at the office. They were comfortable in this environment. The wilderness was a challenge, not a threat. They carried state-of-the-art gear, from advanced communication systems to night vision goggles. They were the apex predators in this environment, or so they believed. But the wilderness has its own rules. It doesn't care about technology or training. It holds ancient secrets, and sometimes it doesn't like to be disturbed. This particular exercise was codenamed Operation Deep Pine. The soldiers were supposed to be the only human presence for 100 square miles. Their commanders wanted to simulate a scenario behind enemy lines, where stealth and self-reliance were paramount. The team moved with practiced efficiency, communicating with hand signals, their boots making almost no sound on the forest floor. They were ghosts in the green twilight of the forest. They felt the familiar thrill of the mission, the focus that comes from pushing your body and mind to their limits. They had no idea that this routine training exercise was about to become a desperate struggle for survival against an enemy they couldn't have imagined. The team was a blend of the best. Army Rangers, known for their grit and direct action capabilities, worked alongside Marine Force Recon, masters of reconnaissance and operating deep behind enemy lines. Leading the unit was Captain Eva Rostova, a ranger with a reputation for being calm under impossible pressure. Her second in command was Marine Gunnery Sergeant Gunny Miller, a veteran with more years in the field than some of the younger soldiers had been alive. They were a perfect match. Rostova was the strategist, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Gunny Miller was the rock, the experienced NCO who knew how to keep the team grounded and focused, no matter what. The bond between these soldiers was forged in the toughest training courses in the world. They had sweat, bled, and endured together. This created a level of trust that goes beyond friendship. It's a deep, unspoken understanding. Each man knew the strengths and weaknesses of the person to his left and right. They could anticipate each other's moves without a word. When Sergeant Diaz, their communications specialist, had trouble with a radio, Corporal Chen, the tech expert, was there to fix it before Diaz even had to ask. This seamless teamwork was their greatest weapon. It was the core of their identity as an elite fighting force, a well-oiled machine built for the harshest conditions. Their professionalism was on full display as they moved through the wilderness. They established their first camp with quiet efficiency. Sentries were posted in a perimeter, their eyes scanning the dark woods. Others checked gear, prepared cold rations, and studied the maps for the next day's route. There was no wasted movement, no idle chatter. Every action had a purpose. Captain Rostova walked the perimeter, speaking in low tones to each sentry, her presence a source of quiet confidence. She trusted her team completely, and they, in turn, placed their lives in her hands without a second thought. This was the discipline and camaraderie that made them the best of the best. This mission was supposed to be a final tune-up before a major deployment. For the younger members of the squad, it was a chance to prove themselves to the veterans. For the older soldiers like Gunny Miller, it was another chapter in a long and storied career. They were focused on the task at hand, navigating the challenging terrain and meeting their objectives. The idea of a real, unknown threat was the furthest thing from their minds. They were soldiers, trained to fight human adversaries. The legends and ghost stories of the Oregon woods were just that, stories. They were about to learn that some stories are based on a terrifying reality. The first day passed without incident. The team covered ground quickly, their movements a testament to their physical conditioning. But as night fell on the second day, the forest began to feel different. A strange quiet descended, deeper than the usual nighttime stillness. The normal sounds of the woods, the chirping of crickets, the call of a distant owl, were gone. It was a dead silence, heavy and unnatural. The soldiers on watch felt it first, a prickling sensation on the back of their necks, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. They scanned the tree line with their night vision goggles, but saw nothing but endless, motionless trees. The next morning, Gunny Miller found the tracks. He was scouting ahead of the main group when he saw them pressed into a patch of soft mud near a stream. They were not from a bear or a cougar, they were canine, but far too large. Each print was the size of a dinner plate, with clear claw marks dug deep into the earth. The stride was immense, suggesting a creature that walked on two legs. He called Captain Rostova over. She knelt, studying the tracks with a frown. There was no animal in any biology book that could make a print like this. She took photos and measurements, her mind racing. It was an anomaly, a puzzle that didn't fit. The unease began to spread through the team. They were trained to be aware of their surroundings, and their instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Later that day they heard it, a long, mournful howl that echoed through the valleys. It wasn't the sound of a wolf, it was deeper, more guttural, and filled with a chilling intelligence. The howl was answered by another, then another, from different points on the surrounding ridges. It sounded like they were being encircled. The soldiers instinctively tightened their formation, their hands moving closer to their rifles. The familiar forest now felt alien and hostile. The training mission was forgotten, replaced by a growing sense of dread. That evening, as they set up a defensive position on a high ridge, more signs appeared. They found trees with massive claw marks gouged into the bark, 10 feet off the ground. Strange, glyph-like symbols were scratched into the wood, almost like a territorial marking. Sergeant Diaz tried to raise command on the radio, but all he got was static. The air was thick with tension. The soldiers, men who had faced enemy fire without flinching, found themselves looking over their shoulders, spooked by snapping twigs and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The feeling of being the hunter was gone. Now, they felt like the prey. The third day started under a gray, heavy sky. The team packed up their gear almost silently. The usual morning jokes were gone. The strange howls had kept going off and on all night, getting closer every time. No one had slept much. Every soldier's face showed how tired and worried they were. Captain Rostova gathered the team. She talked about the strange tracks and sounds directly. Her voice was steady, not showing any of the worry she felt. She told the team to move closer together, with their weapons ready to fire. The mission wasn't about practice anymore. It was about getting to the pickup spot safely. As they went deeper into the forest, a bad smell started to float on the wind. It was a strong, musky smell, like a wet dog mixed with something rotten. It got stronger as they moved, making the soldiers cover their noses. The smell was sickening and really unsettling. It stayed in the air, always reminding them that something big and dirty was nearby. Gunny Miller, with his many years of tracking, had never smelled anything like it. It was the smell of a hunter, a strong one that protected its area. The team knew, without a doubt, that they weren't alone in these woods anymore. The stress was starting to show. These were tough soldiers, but they were trained to fight enemies they could understand. This was different. This was an enemy from a nightmare. The unknown is a powerful weapon, and it was getting into their minds. Every shadow seemed like a danger. The wind whistling through the pine trees sounded like a whisper. A young ranger, Corporal Jenkins, jumped when a branch fell nearby, his rifle coming up before he stopped himself. Gunny Miller put a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Stay sharp, son," he mumbled. "Keep your head in the game." The words were for Jenkins, but everyone heard them. By late afternoon, the tension was so thick you could almost touch it. They found a deer body in a clearing. It hadn't been eaten by other animals. It had been ripped apart with amazing force. The ribs were torn open, and huge pieces of meat were missing. The ground around it was messed up, covered with more of those huge dog-like tracks. It was a brutal, violent sight. This wasn't just an animal hunting for food. This felt like a warning. It was a message, written in blood and bone, telling them they were trespassing. They were in someone else's territory, and they were not welcome. As the sun began to dip below the jagged peaks, the forest grew dark with alarming speed. Captain Rostova made the call to set up a defensive perimeter for the night on a rocky outcropping that offered a good field of fire. The team worked quickly, their movements sharp and economical. They placed claymore mines around the perimeter and set up motion sensors tied to their comms. They weren't taking any chances. The foul, musky scent was stronger than ever, seeming to come from all directions at once. The woods fell into that same dead silence they had experienced before. The air was cold and still, pregnant with a terrible anticipation. The first visual contact came just as the last light faded from the sky. A sentry, using his thermal optics, caught movement at the edge of the tree line, about 200 yards out. It wasn't a deer or a bear. The heat signature was tall, man-shaped, but its proportions were all wrong. It was lean and powerful, moving with a fluid, predatory grace. He whispered into his mic, "Contact, tree line, 2 o'clock, single target." Captain Rostova brought her own binoculars up, her heart pounding. She saw it too. A tall, upright figure just visible in the gloom. It stood there for a moment, its head turning as if it were sniffing the air. Then, it stepped out from behind a tree, and the soldier's blood ran cold. It was 7, maybe 8 feet tall, covered in coarse, dark fur. It had the powerful legs of a canine, bent backward like a dog's, but it stood on 2 feet. Its upper body was brutally muscular, with long arms that ended in hands tipped with wicked-looking claws. But the head was the worst part. It was the head of a monstrous wolf or dog, with a long snout filled with yellow fangs. Its eyes glowed with a faint, chilling luminescence in the darkness. It was a dogman, a creature of folklore and campfire tales made real and standing right in front of them. Before they could fully process the impossible sight, another one emerged from the woods, and another. Soon there were at least half a dozen of them, forming a loose semicircle around their position. They weren't rushing in. They were watching, studying them with a terrifying intelligence. One of them let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the ground. It was a sound of pure menace. The soldiers, frozen for a moment in disbelief, fell back on their training. Safeties clicked off. Sights were aimed at center mass. The surreal nightmare had become a tactical problem. The training mission was over. The fight for their lives had just begun. "Light 'em up!" Captain Rostova's voice cut through the stunned silence. The night erupted in a deafening roar of gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness, revealing the horrific forms of the creatures in stark, terrifying detail. The soldiers operated like the well-oiled machine they were. They fired in controlled, 3-round bursts, aiming for the creatures' chests and heads. The sound of bullets hitting flesh was a series of wet, thudding impacts. One of the dogmen staggered back, howling in pain as rounds tore into its shoulder. But it didn't fall. Their bodies were impossibly tough, absorbing bullets that would have dropped any man or beast. The creatures reacted with shocking speed and intelligence. Instead of a mindless charge, they scattered, using the trees and rocks for cover. They moved with an unnatural agility, bounding on all fours for speed. then rising to their full height to peer over cover. They were communicating using a series of guttural barks and growls to coordinate their movements. This wasn't a pack of wild animals. This was an organized attack. They were being hunted by something that was not only strong and fast, but also smart. The soldiers had to constantly shift their fields of fire, trying to track the dark shapes that darted through the gloom. The battle became a tense and terrifying siege. The dogmen would probe the perimeter, rushing in from one side to draw fire, while another would try to flank them from the other. The soldiers' discipline held firm. Gunny Miller shouted out targets, directing fire and making sure no one was tunnel-visioned on a single creature. Diaz, 3 o'clock, in the rocks. Chen, watch your left flank. His voice was a calming anchor in the chaos. The air was filled with the smell of cordite, the foul musk of the creatures, and the metallic tang of fear. The night vision goggles turned the scene into a ghostly green ballet of death. One of the creatures, larger than the rest, made a bold rush toward the perimeter. It moved with terrifying speed, a blur of dark fur and gleaming teeth. It ran straight toward one of the claymore mines. Rostova keyed her mic. Fire in the hole. A soldier triggered the detonator. The mine exploded with a thunderous boom, sending a wave of shrapnel and dirt into the air. The massive dogman was thrown backward, its body torn and broken. A guttural, agonized scream echoed through the forest, a sound that would haunt the soldiers' nightmares for years to come. But the attack didn't stop. The remaining creatures only became more cautious, more determined. The fight dragged on, feeling like an eternity. The initial shock wore off, replaced by a grim, adrenaline-fueled focus. Ammunition was a concern. They were firing more rounds than they had ever anticipated. Captain Rostova ordered them to conserve ammo, to make every shot count. The dogmen were patient. They would retreat into the darkness for long periods, leaving the soldiers in a state of high alert, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. Then, the attack would resume with sudden, terrifying violence. It was a calculated assault on their resources and their morale. They were trying to wear the soldiers down. A close call sent a jolt of terror through the team. A dogman, moving with absolute silence, managed to crawl up a rock face on the perimeter's blind side. It rose up right behind Corporal Jenkins, who was focused on the tree line in front of him. Its claws, as long as knives, were raised to strike. Gunny Miller, who was scanning the entire perimeter, saw the movement out of the corner of his eye. "Jenkins, behind you!" he roared. Jenkins spun around, his eyes wide with horror as the creature lunged. He barely had time to bring his rifle up. A burst of gunfire erupted from Gunny's rifle, catching the creature in the chest and knocking it off the ledge. The psychological pressure was immense. These were men trained for the horrors of war, but nothing could prepare them for this. The creatures were a violation of the natural order. Seeing them, hearing their howls, fighting them, it was an assault on their sanity. One soldier began reciting a prayer under his breath. Another was just muttering, "This isn't real? This isn't real," over and over. Captain Rostova moved along the line, her presence a constant reassurance. "Focus on your sector," she commanded, her voice firm. "Talk to each other. Stay with me. We get through this together." Her leadership held the team together, preventing the creeping fear from turning into outright panic. As the night wore on, the dogmen became more desperate. They launched a coordinated charge from two sides at once. The forest lit up with muzzle flashes as the soldiers met the charge with a wall of lead. One creature broke through the line, swiping its massive claws at a soldier, tearing through his pack and body armor, leaving deep gashes. The soldier screamed, a sound of pure agony. Immediately, two other soldiers turned and fired, bringing the beast down in a hail of bullets. They dragged their wounded comrade to the center of the perimeter. The medic, his hands shaking but his training taking over, went to work. The fight had drawn blood. It had become terrifyingly real. The battle raged until the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. As the darkness started to recede, the dogmen seemed to melt back into the forest. The guttural growls and howls faded, replaced by the eerie silence that preceded their arrival. The soldiers, exhausted and battered, remained in their positions, their weapons still trained on the shadows. They didn't dare believe it was over. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing the carnage. The ground around their position was littered with shell casings. The bodies of 3 of the creatures lay where they had fallen, their monstrous forms looking even more unreal in the morning light. The cost of their survival was steep. 2 soldiers were wounded, one seriously. The medic had managed to stabilize him, but he needed immediate evacuation. Their ammunition was critically low. Every member of the team was physically and emotionally drained. The horrors of the night were etched on their faces. They looked at the dead creatures with a mixture of revulsion and awe. They were real. They had fought them and killed them. But the victory felt hollow. The world they knew had been shattered. The clear line between myth and reality had been erased. They were soldiers, but they now felt like survivors of a horror movie. Captain Rostova knew they couldn't stay there. She got on the radio, and to her immense relief, the static was gone. The signal was clear. She made contact with their command base, her voice strained but steady. She skipped the unbelievable details, simply reporting that they had been engaged by multiple, large unidentified hostiles and had sustained casualties. She requested an immediate medical evacuation and extraction for the entire team. There was a moment of confused silence on the other end of the line, but the urgency in her voice was unmistakable. A helicopter was dispatched immediately. As they waited for the sound of rotors, the team packed up what little gear they could. No one spoke. The silence was heavy with unspoken trauma. They avoided looking at each other, as if ashamed of the terror they felt. Gunny Miller walked over to the body of the largest dogman. He stared down at it, his face a mask of grim disbelief. He had seen everything in his long career, but this was something new, something impossible. This encounter had left a scar on his soul, a wound that no amount of time or training could ever fully heal. He knew that none of them would ever be the same again. The thumping sound of the Black Hawk helicopter was the most beautiful sound they had ever heard. It descended into a nearby clearing, its rotors kicking up a storm of leaves and dirt. The team moved quickly, carrying their wounded. As they lifted off, they looked down at the dark, endless sea of trees that stretched to the horizon. The forest looked peaceful, beautiful, and completely indifferent to the terror it had held just hours before. The bodies of the dogmen were left behind, soon to be reclaimed by the wilderness. Their story would be buried in classified reports and dismissed as a mass hallucination brought on by stress. The official debriefing was a surreal experience. The soldiers told their story, their voices flat and emotionless. They described the creatures, the tracks, the intelligent tactics. They were met with looks of skepticism and concern from their superior officers. Psychologists were brought in. The team was separated and interviewed for weeks. The final report concluded that the team had encountered an unusually aggressive and large pack of wolves, and that the stress of the training exercise had led to sensory distortion and shared delusion. The physical evidence, the claw marks on the gear, the wounds on the soldiers, was explained away. The case was officially closed, but the members of Operation Deep Pine knew what they had seen. They were forever changed. Some left the military, unable to reconcile their experience with the world they were supposed to protect. Others stayed, but they carried the secret with them, a heavy burden that isolated them from their peers. They would wake up in the middle of the night, the sound of guttural howls echoing in their ears. They would see glowing eyes in every shadow. They had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back with the face of a monstrous dog. The camaraderie that had been their strength was now a shared trauma that bound them together in silence. So, what really lives in the deep, uncharted places of our world? We tell ourselves that we have mapped every corner, explained every mystery. But have we? All across North America, from the forests of the Pacific Northwest to the swamps of the South, people report seeing these same creatures. Are they all sharing the same delusion? Or are there pockets of wilderness so vast and so remote that ancient predators, things of legend, can still survive, hidden from our modern eyes? The story of this elite team of soldiers serves as a chilling reminder. It forces us to ask an unsettling question. Just because we don't believe in monsters, does that mean they aren't out there, waiting in the dark?